Hi there, thanks for stopping by my channel. Today I'm sharing a technique to make what looks like geodes on my cards using a product from Brutus Monroe called Glitter Glaze. It is a glittery paste that can be applied in a variety of ways, most commonly through a stencil, but today I'll be using it a little differently, and it comes in a variety of colors. They also offer a Glitter Glaze of the Month Club, which sends an exclusive color right to your door every month. I've listed the colors that I used for those sample cards on my blog post, so be sure to check that out. Today I'll be using the colors Grape and Carnival. Carnival is from the new set of Mardi Gras glitter glazes. I am also using a piece of alabaster cardstock, a palette knife, and a baby wipe for the first part of the project. I'll be starting out with the darkest color Grape, and I'm using a small amount on the tip of the knife just to freehand the shape. Now, I know this will stress some of you stampers and card makers out, but I just make a random shape. There's no particular size or measurements. And don't worry if the edges are messy, we're going to be going over them with another color in a little bit. One of the reasons I really like the Glitter Glaze of the Month Club or the exclusive sets is because the colors have been adding nice complements to the regular collection. I like to do ombre or gradient effects with a lot of my stenciling, and many of the club colors have been lighter or darker tones of existing shades, so they're pretty on their own or in conjunction with another existing color. For example, on that green card, I used emerald, a regular color, and mint, a club color. On the blue card, I used berry, a regular color, and then glacier, a club color. If you don't have the right tones that you want, you could consider mixing the glitter glaze with inks or pigments to create the shades that you want. Now I'm going in with the Carnival shade, which is a little bit of a lighter tone around the outside, and I'm just taking really small bits on the tip of the palette knife to get a little bit more control when spreading it around. If you Google images of geodes, there's a lot of variation in shape and color tones, so there's really no wrong way to do this. Typically, you do see the darker shades towards the middle and the lighter shades towards the outside edges, but you can definitely experiment with whatever colors you have on hand. I actually got the idea for this card because I was scrolling around Instagram while searching for card ideas, and I ended up watching a whole bunch of cookie decorating videos. I came across one video clip from an account called the Ginger Snap, which has these incredible cookies, and they were using sugar and liquid food coloring to make geodes on their cookies. I thought glitter glaze might be a fun way to try to translate the technique to paper. I did try this technique at first with the Fallen Snow glitter glaze, which is a white or transparent color, and I painted over it with watercolors when it was dry, but it didn't have quite the effect that I was going for. I might try at a later date coloring the Fallen Snow glitter glaze by mixing it with ink, like smushing an ink pad onto my craft mat and mixing it together. But I have to order more Fallen Snow because I use so much of it on Christmas and winter cards that I'm all out. This video is also sped up a little bit. It's about 1.5 times the speed just because I was a little bit slow and careful and I didn't want the video to drag too much. So it did take me a few minutes, and with this part in particular, I was a little more careful with how I was smoothing on the glitter glaze. I also then took my palette knife after putting the second color on and blended it together a little bit by running the palette knife around where the two colors meet. The third color I'm going to use for this is gold. If you look at a lot of images of geodes, there's usually some sort of golden or silver or metallic effect around the edge. So using the same technique that I used with the lighter purple shade, I'll be taking little bits of the gold on the tip of the palette knife and spreading it right around the edge. This was the layer that I was most careful with the placement because it will be the final edge. I also want to mention that I'm putting on a pretty thick layer of the glitter glaze. When stenciling, I usually scrape any glazes or pastes fairly thin across the top, but for this technique, you want a good thick buildup of the color and glitter. If you're starting to see some of the white paper through the paste, it means that you need some more. It will also take longer than usual to dry because it is a much thicker layer. The glitter glaze typically dries very quickly, but in this case, you're going to want to wait longer than usual to make sure that all of it has dried. If you've never used the glitter glazes before, you can see in this video that they look a little bit opaque. It looks a little bit more milky and not as bright as the finished image pictures that I showed you. This will dry much differently. It will dry with the glaze itself, the carrier product, with a much more transparent finish. And the glitter will be the bright color that you see. As I did with the 2 shades of purple, I'm using the palette knife to blend the area where the 2 colors meet. So in this case, the gold and the light purple shade Carnival. After waiting to make sure the glitter glaze has dried completely, I'm using a glue pen to foil around the outside of the geode shape. There are a few pens that will work well for this. I'm using a tonic glue pen in the video, but there's also a really good one from DecoFoil that I just ran out of. You can really use any glue that will dry tacky, such as the Zig 2-way glue pens. There just has to be a sticky surface for the foil to adhere to, since you can't run the project through a laminator. Experiment with any glue that you might have in your stash. You might actually have something that will work. I'm using a generous amount of the glue to make sure that there is a lot for the foil to stick. Off camera, I left the glue to dry completely. If the glue is still wet at all, the foil will not stick to it. Once it's ready, I'm taking a scrap piece of gold DecoFoil and using my finger to burnish it onto the glue areas. The beauty of this technique is that if the foil doesn't stick all the way the first time you peel it up, you can go back over it again. If it still doesn't stick quite right, you can apply more glue to that area and try again when it's dry. I had to do that in a few areas with my sample cards and they still looked great. I ended up finding this tool in my stash that is usually for flower shaping, but the metal ball tip allowed for much more precise burnishing. It's definitely not necessary. I didn't use it with the first few cards I made and they worked just fine. I'm working my way around in small sections and just checking and peeling up slowly after each burnish. Foiling is one of my favorite things at the moment, but I typically use toner sheets or pre-printed images with a laminator in my work. I haven't played around very much with glue techniques. It was much easier than I expected and gave a really nice result. The metallic gold edge around the geodes gave it a much more polished and finished look. The last step I used was to take some of this liquid element from Brutus Monroe in the shade Gilded, which is a golden water-based shimmer spray. I'll zoom into the edge in a minute so you can see, but I was left with a little bit of white space between the foiling and the edge of the glitter glaze. You can play around with how to make the foil touch right up to the edge, maybe with a finer tip glue pen or a tinier tool to burnish the foil more precisely, but I decided just to fill it in with this liquid element. I sprayed a little puddle on my craft mat and used a small paintbrush to fill in the white space. Here in the closer image, you can see a little better the white gap that was between the glitter glaze and the foil. Again, you may find something in your stash that you want to use. You could probably even use some regular glitter, or you could use some gold paint, or even maybe a gold Sharpie, anything that you may have on hand. But I chose to use this beautiful liquid element as an added layer of shimmer, and it worked perfectly. I did this with all of the sample images that you saw at the beginning of the video as well. That's it for the technique of creating these geodes. The sample cards that you saw at the beginning of the video I'll show again. They give you some ideas for how to finish off these projects. I used Gilded sparkle embossing powder from Brutus Monroe to create the sparkly gold layer to put under the card fronts. Gold embossing or gold foiling pairs nicely for sentiments with this technique. Check out my blog post for more information on the assembly of the cards. Thanks for watching.